Homeless youth are a hidden population. They're on the move and they often distrust or avoid service agencies. This makes it difficult to count homeless youth and even harder to ask what kind of support they need. Homelessness is often the focus of policy discussion, but the unique needs of homeless young people do not get the same attention that adult homelessness gets. In 2006, the California Research Bureau partnered with the California Council on Youth Relations to give homeless youth a voice in developing effective policies to prevent and curb homelessness. Previous research on homeless youth has sampled shelters and drop-in centers, leaving out the many homeless youth who do not access services. We wanted our research to be different, so we hired homeless and formerly homeless youth to do the interviews, hoping we could reach beyond the shelters and drop-ins. To make sure we heard from young people who weren't reached by previous studies, we defined homeless as anyone under the age of 25 who doesn't have a stable or permanent address. We wanted to include the invisible homeless population, those who couch surf or stay in hotels but share the same challenges as those who sleep on the street or in shelters.
I've lived in churches, I've lived in chicken shacks, I've lived in cars, I've lived on many carpets, many sofas.
Our team of youth researchers interviewed more than 200 people in 28 California cities. They asked how their peers became homeless and what they need to improve their housing situation. They asked questions like, how do you feel you are perceived on the street? What do you need to stay mentally healthy? Who do you rely on when you need help? As well as questions about law enforcement, education, and why they do or don't access services. An advisory group of young people in San Francisco met weekly to talk about the research and develop real policy recommendations. And our research team led 6 seminars in Sacramento to discuss the research findings in more depth and talk about solutions. From the research and policy seminars, we learned that contrary to stereotypes about homeless youth, most young people do not choose to leave home. They are pushed out. Either they are kicked out or family conflict forces them out. 95% of the young people we surveyed said the breakdown of family relationships was the primary cause of their homelessness.
The National Alliance to End Homelessness look at family failure or system failure as the major causes of youth homelessness.
About 70% of these young people told us that they had been victims of child abuse or neglect. Young people have experienced a huge amount of trauma at home or in the foster care system, on the street, and in the community where they live.
My mom married a guy that was in the military and he would beat the crap out of me. And I got really sick of it, so when I was 12 I left and I couch surfed for like a year and then lived on the streets.
I love our homeless for one reason, and myself was because of domestic violence. It starts with your family. If your family don't take care of you, then you're basically homeless.
When I was 12 years old and I had been kicked out of my home for being out of control because I fought my stepfather who propositioned my sister for sex.
When I asked them since when they became homeless, someone would say 15 years, 20 years, and I'm like, oh, you're just 21. And they said, well, since I've been in the foster care, that's when I became homeless.
The responses, once they turn 18, that they're in the foster care system, they have to move out on their own, and some of them don't even have all the skills in life to be on their own.
Once I got into foster care, I used to leave all the time, so I would pretty much just go back out, be homeless again. Why? Because I can't sit in someone's house, like a group home or a foster home, with somebody that I know don't care.
It always boils down to the family, like you end up in foster care because of the family.
Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender youth, they're not given that choice. Most of them are thrown out once they come out to their primary caregivers.
They're out there, deciding that they want to transition and go from male to female, and they have nowhere to go.
And we may or may not be doing a good job of reaching the kids in the system, but there's another cohort of kids that are not in the system at all, and how do we reach them?
We need to start serving people that's not just in the system. Do expect youth to go outside, start robbing people, fighting people so that we get into the system, so to get some help.
Kids who are homeless really are the same kids in the foster care system, except that they either got missed by that system or opted out of it. In other words, they're the same abused and neglected kids.
Our first recommendation: Extend the support services created for foster youth in the last decade to the wider transition-aged youth population.
I'd say the worst thing about being homeless is pretty much losing yourself. Like a lot of your identity. You pretty much walk around the street. I find myself walking to the point where I fall asleep right where I was.
A home and food and clothing and all of those basic resources is mental health. Those things are an intervention in and of itself.
I went downhill from there. Like, I started prostituting and selling drugs. I knew this isn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I just, by that time, I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to get out of it.
These young people aren't experimenting, they're self-medicating. Their trauma histories are long and severe and intense, and they're doing the best they can do just to get through that day.
I ended up having to do sex work, which was something that had went on with a lot of my friends in Hollywood who were going through their transition, and it was very, very common, you know? And I cannot do that sober.
Ask anyone why they started using meth, and it was because I was victimized on Thursday night when I was sleeping, and I didn't want to be victimized again on Friday, so I stayed up, and the only way that I knew how to do that was to use.
What you get a year after, 2 years after, is you get increased issues with mental health issues. You get increased substance abuse issues. That really is self-medication. You get all of the things that young people may have had small problems with as they're transitioning out. If you wait 2 years until they actually become homeless, those small issues become large issues.